Live right now, the U.S. Senate is holding the confirmation hearing of Dr. Rachel Levine. Hi everyone, I'm Matt Haslam from the Pennsylvania Equality Project, and while most senators are asking Dr. Rachel Levine actual questions about her qualifications during her nomination hearing today, Senator Rand Paul started his question with,
"Genital mutilation has been nearly universally condemned."
In his remarks, he looked Dr. Rachel Levine in the eyes while trying to discredit her valid gender identity. In his remarks, he asked her if transgender kids should have a say in whether or not they are trans. Obviously, Senator Rand Paul hasn't seen the thousands of scientific studies done on this to know gender is determined in your brain, not your genitals, and that most trans people know their true gender at around 5 years old. He continued to state lies and claimed kids were getting surgeries to remove their body parts before they are an adult. Our advice to Senator Rand Paul is to maybe check to make sure you actually know what you're talking about and know with 100% certainty that this is actually happening before you make a public fool of yourself. The truth is, transgender children can only get hormones and puberty blockers before they turn 16. Then and only then, and after a year or more on those drugs, are 17 and 18-year-olds allowed to start talking with their doctors about surgery at all. But they are only able to do any of this before 18 with their parent or legal guardian's consent and with a licensed psychiatrist approval. So kids aren't having surgeries to remove or add body parts. That's never happened. No one is advocating for that, and we're saddened he's using these lies to advance his hate on such an amazing woman like Dr. Rachel Levine. Now, while Senator Paul's questions were all about children, all of his questions were also carefully worded to basically ask Dr. Levine to publicly state her own gender is not valid. He was literally asking a transgender woman who knows full well that her gender is valid to state on public record that her gender wasn't. And when she refused to do this, Senator Rand Paul cited an article by the American College of Pediatricians, which you might first assume is a legitimate organization full of actual doctors. But it's not, by the way. It's an anti-LGBTQ hate group funded by some of the worst homophobic and transphobic conservatives in the country. So his claim that, quote,
"The American College of Pediatricians reports that 80 to 95%
of transgender people experience, quote, resolution and change their minds about being trans is wildly inaccurate, to say the least." As if it weren't bad enough, Senator Rand Paul then cited a case of conversion therapy in his questions. When Levine refused to condemn her own gender, he doubled down and told us about a case of Kiara Bell, a trans person from London, England, who is currently suing NHS, otherwise known as the National Health Services over in London, as of last year for, quote, allowing Bell to be transgender. The case was started early last year, again in London, England, mind you, but has sparked a conversation about conversion therapy and internalized transphobia. It's not really a great case to cite for someone trying to advance the narrative that being trans is wrong, since it points more towards how wrong our system is to teach these kids how their decisions are wrong to make and how they can't make these decisions that early in life. So Rand Paul literally took transphobia and conversion therapy directly to one of the most amazing and well-respected transgender people in the country, and he cited hate groups and conversion therapy in order to do it. And after Senator Paul left the meeting early in complete disgust, he took to Twitter, where he stated, quote, "Biden nominee refuses to answer my question." But even there, he is blatantly lying. Dr. Rachel Levine did actually dignify his transphobic question with a response. She publicly stated, quote,
"Well, Senator, thank you for your interest in this question. Transgender medicine is a very complex and nuanced field with robust research and standards of care that have been developed. And if I am fortunate enough to be confirmed as the Assistant Secretary of Health, I would look forward to working with you and your office and coming to your office and discussing the particulars of the standards of care for transgender medicine."
She answered his transphobia with thank you. She answered hate with love in return. This is why she is such an incredible human being and such an incredible woman. The Pennsylvania Equality Project publicly calls on Senator Rand Paul from Kentucky to immediately resign from his position as a senator and to offer a full apology to Dr. Rachel Levine. Such hatred should never be tolerated in any public office. His full and immediate resignation, along with a public apology, is the only resolution that is acceptable after such a terrible action. If you would like to see the entire uninterrupted and unedited version of what Dr. Rachel Levine and Senator Rand Paul had to say in their interaction earlier today, then please watch on later in this video, as we'll be including the entire thing uninterrupted and unedited later on. Thank you so much for watching. For the Pennsylvania Equality Project, I'm Matt Haslam, and please join us over on Senator Rand Paul's page to call on him to immediately resign and to offer a public apology to Dr. Rachel Levine.
Senator Paul.
Genital mutilation has been nearly universally condemned. Genital mutilation has been condemned by the WHO, the United Nations Children's Fund, the United Nations Population Fund. According to the WHO, genital mutilation is recognized internationally as a violation of human rights. Genital mutilation is considered particularly egregious because, as the WHO notes, it is nearly always carried out on minors and is a violation of the rights of children. Most genital mutilation is not typically performed by force, but as WHO notes, that by social convention, social norm, the social pressure to conform, to do what others do and have been doing, as well as the need to be accepted socially and the fear of being rejected by the community. American culture is now normalizing the idea that minors can be given hormones to prevent their biological development of their secondary sexual characteristics. Dr. Levine, you have supported both allowing minors to be given hormone blockers to prevent them from going through puberty, as well as surgical destruction of a minor's genitalia. Like surgical mutilation, hormonal interruption of puberty can permanently alter and prevent secondary sexual characteristics. The American College of Pediatricians reports that 80 to 95% of prepubertal children with gender dysphoria will experience resolution by late adolescence if not exposed to medical intervention and social affirmation. Dr. Levine, do you believe that minors are capable of making such a life-changing decision as changing one's sex?
Well, Senator, thank you for your interest in this question. Transgender medicine is a very complex and nuanced field with robust research and standards of care that have been developed. And if I am fortunate enough to be confirmed as the Assistant Secretary of Health, I would look forward to working with you and your office and coming to your office and discussing the particulars of the standards of care for transgender medicine.
The specific question was about minors. Let's be a little more specific since you evaded the question. Do you support the government intervening to override the parent's consent to give a child puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and/or amputation surgery of breasts and genitalia? You have said that you're willing to accelerate the protocols for street kids. I'm alarmed that poor kids with no parents who are homeless and distraught, you would just go through this and allow that to happen to a minor. I would hope that you would have compassion for Kira Bell, who's a 23-year-old girl who was confused with her identity. At 14, she read on the internet about something about transsexual. She thought, well, maybe that's what I am. She ended up getting these puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones. She had her breasts amputated. But here's what ultimately she says now. And this is a very insightful decision from someone who made a mistake but was led to believe this was a good thing by the medical community. I made a brash decision as a teenager, as a lot of teenagers do, trying to find confidence and happiness, except now the rest of my life will be negatively affected, she said, adding that the medicalized gender transitioning was a very temporary, superficial fix for a very complex identity issue. What I'm alarmed at is that you're not willing to say absolutely minors shouldn't be making decisions to amputate their breast or to amputate their genitalia. For most of our history, we believe that minors don't have full rights and the parents need to be involved. So I'm alarmed that you won't say with certainty that minors should not have the ability to make the decision to take hormones that will affect them for the rest of their life. Will you make a more firm decision on whether or not minors should be involved in these decisions?
Senator, transgender medicine is a very complex and nuanced field, and if confirmed to the position of Assistant Secretary of Health, I would certainly be pleased to come to your office and talk with you and your staff about the standards of care and the complexity of this field.
Let it go into the record that the witness refused to answer the question. The question is a very specific one. Should minors be making these momentous decisions? For most of the history of medicine, we wouldn't let you have a cut sewn up in the ER, but you're willing to let a minor take things that prevent their puberty, and you think they get that back? You give a woman testosterone enough that she grows a beard, you think she's going to go back looking like a woman when you stop the testosterone? You have permanently changed them. Infertility is another problem. None of these drugs have been approved for this. They're all being used off-label. I find it ironic that the left that went nuts over hydroxychloroquine being used possibly for COVID are not alarmed that these hormones are being used off-label. There's no long-term studies. We don't know what happens to them. We do know that there are dozens and dozens of people who've been through this who regret that this happened and a permanent change happened to them. And, you know, if you've ever been around children, 14-year-olds can't make this decision. In the gender dysphoria clinic in England, 10% of the kids are between the ages of 3 and 10. We should be outraged that someone's talking to a 3-year-old about changing their sex. I can't vote for you if you can't.
Thank you so much, Senator Paul. Senator Levine, thank you for answering the question. I will turn to Senator Baldwin.